Te reo ererangi o te mānia. This episode was produced in Otatahi by Plains Media, with support from New Zealand On Air.
Today, the oceans hold their breath as we journey into Ringlet and the Day the Oceans Stop, by Felicity Williams, published by Ahoy, an imprint of the Cuba Press in 2019. Join Libby as waves of mystery, courage and wonder sweep us into an unforgettable adventure. Chapter 5. Ringlet has a meal full of surprises. Everyone was staring at her. Ringlet wondered why, and whether it was a good or a bad thing. She slid to the edge of the pathway in an effort to be less noticeable, but it made no difference. As she continued to skim along behind Platita, the hordes of sea folk on Pearl Promenade, flipping from tile to tile like they were playing a giant game of hopscotch, turned their heads mid-flap and stared. There are two kinds of being stared at. One is the kind that you get when your merdog has won the Supreme Award in the cutie wooty itty bitty thing pet contest. And the second is the kind that you get when your merdog was disqualified for biting the judge's hand. Ringlet's being stared at felt like the second kind. She plunged into a cross-current and narrowly avoided running into an elderly pair of cuttlefish who were trying to cross the promenade. She passed a chattering group of lady lobsters. One waved a claw in the air, half painted with warrior red nail polish. "Want a manicure?" asked the lobster. She did, but there was no time. Platita was gliding down the Pearl Promenade, getting further and further ahead. Ringlet wove her way in and out of the crowds until she'd caught up. Then it was her turn to stare. Something wasn't right. The frill, the ripple of water left behind as a mermaid swims, is an indication of beauty and brains. Mermaids pride themselves on their frills, and no two were ever the same. But Platita, 6th of the 7 stellar mermaids, didn't have one. At all. How odd. A loud whooshing noise interrupted her thoughts. A few tiles on the promenade had broken loose, and a plume of gassy water was escaping. A swarm of excited mer children raced the spot and began queuing in front of the bubbling geyser so that they could take turns riding it. An older mer boy pushed 2 at a time into the spiraling water. "You there, want to go?" said the mer boy. He turned to position 2 mer kids above the spout. Ringlet didn't respond. The mer boy had skin the colour of ebony, and his eyes glittered like 2 silver orbs. And he was speaking to her. She blushed. "I'd love to," she said, "but..." The mer boy helped the 2 dizzy kids down from the ride. "Platita, I mustn't, A ripple of whispers crackled along the queue at the mention of Platita. A pretty mermaid up the front wailed and trotted away to hide behind a large black rock. No one else moved. Ringlet was aware she was being stared at. Again. This time, the staring made her feel annoyed. It's rude to stare. Don't they know that? "Oh," said the merboy. "I didn't know you were with her." He hoisted another mer kid onto the twister. "You'd better go. You don't want to make her mad." "Do you know her?" asked Ringlet. "Know her? Nah. But everyone knows about her." He grinned. "At least the rumours about her." "She's getting me a horse," said Ringlet, "for Derby Day, whatever and whenever that is." "The race?" said the merboy. "Tomorrow. She's the patron, right? They come from everywhere just to gaze at her. Beats me why. You'd better get going. Do yourself a favor, though. Don't try to cross those stilly ponds up ahead. You'll get stuck." "Which way, then?" asked Ringlet. "Behind Black Rock." He pointed to the left of the Pearl Promenade. He turned his head. "Hey, Tendril, want a turn?" The small mermaid, who had vamoosed, popped her head out from where she was hiding. She took one terrified look at the plats swirling above the crowd in the distance, shook her head furiously, and disappeared again. Ringlet looked over to where the boy had pointed. There was a small glassy indentation, but hardly anything to freak out about. "Thanks," she said. "I guess I'll see you around." "Yeah, I guess." He hauled another 2 merkids onto the geyser, smiling at Ringlet as she turned to follow Petita. Ringlet could feel her cheeks flush, and it took all she had not to turn around again to see if he was still smiling, still staring, the good kind of staring. A gong sounded. A sign hanging down from a large cabin across Pearl Promenade started to spin around. It made a grunting sound, and she could see writing on it, although she was too far away to make out the words. "Behind Black Rock, then," she thought. Better to be safe than stuck. Been there, done that. I wonder what his name is. "Crevasse du jour. Food for lazyfish. Open for lunch." Underneath the sign was a picture of a fish with a serviette looped around his upper body, and a knife and fork clasped in each of his upper fins. Ringlet recognized the sculptured archway where the sign was suspended. She was right back at the entrance through which she had exited with Iski in a bucket earlier in the day. It was in front of this cabin that Petita, 6th of the 7 stellar mermaids, had stopped to talk to someone. A mermaid, Ringlet noticed, of much the same age as herself. The young mermaid was holding up a slab, and Petita was writing on it. Ringlet wove in and out of the fast-swirling crowds, and was about to flip off the promenade when a rowdy assortment of wiry-looking sea folk surged ahead of her. Then someone tugged her hair hard. She felt herself being dragged along upside down. She writhed and tried to wrench the hands off her, but they were moving too fast. "Leave her alone," said a voice. "She's not one of us." "She's green and grubby," said another one. "So she could well be." The newcomers dropped her, and she watched them through a flurry of bubbles. They were pale-skinned, with webbed hands and feet, and large eyes. An unruly mass of wavy green hair swirled above their heads. The bubbles cleared, and she was looking at hundreds of red eyes on stalks and sets of pincers that were fluffing Petita's vermilion tail. A thin arm shot down, and a hand clamped around a strand of seashell tail. Iski vanished. Ringlet flung upwards. Petita was holding the merdog. She pulled his wings, examining them. "I'll have him back, if you don't mind," said Ringlet. She whistled, and Iski twisted and squirmed and jumped, and she grabbed him and held him close. She could see that Petita was not pleased, because a storm cloud was gathering on her forehead. "There's no need to snatch," she said, forcing her lips into a smile. "I am simply checking up on his health. As a kindness," she added. "But it isn't a proper smile," thought Ringlet. "Not really." "And really, darling Kach, you've only this minute arrived, haven't you? And already causing a commotion." "There's nothing wrong with his health," said Ringlet. "And yes, there was a bit of a commotion, but it wasn't my fault. They crashed into me." "Nixies!" Petita gave a shudder. The storm cloud grew even darker and spread down her cheekbones. Dreadful little things. They slipped in somehow from the upworlds when no one was looking, and now they're everywhere, leaving their filthy trails. No harm done, I suppose, said Ringlet. Perdita smiled, and this time the storm cloud on her face evaporated. The sun came out, but it wasn't a happy golden sun. It was a brassy, glaring sun, the sort that stings your eyes. The crab jumped up and down on Perdita's shoulder, and then, as if in response to the unpredictable weather on her face, ran and buried himself in her armpit. Plan A, he said in a muffled voice, or B or C. Perdita's long fingers stretched out, strumming the water. I'm a little peckish, truth to tell, she said finally. So let's tally-ho to Plan C. The crab scampered down to the end of Perdita's arm. Perdita, sixth of the 7 stellar mermaids, request the pleasure of your company at high tea, he said. High tea, rasped 100 tiny voices as a flurry of excitement rippled around the orange tail. Perdita, 6th of the 7 stellar mermaids, glissaded into crevice du jour, and Ringlet followed. Now that she was entering as a proper customer, instead of escaping as an intruder, she could see that it was quite enchanting. Itty-bitty milliwatt fish circled, the light from their bodies casting a soft glow. Upbeat music filtered down from the ceiling. The Nixies occupied a large table, and closer by, a pod of plankton nibbled blissfully on something so small it was invisible. Ringlet shimmied her way down to the centre of the restaurant. She held Isky by a single paw and twirled him around above her head. The music made her feel happy and ready for anything. Perdita slid into a seat, and Ringlet followed. Echidna, who had been floating with her back to them, spun around. She had a purple spiky head with inquisitive, deep-set eyes that glistened and needle-sharp arms. Welcome to Crevice du Jour, she said, handing them both a menu. I'll give you both a minute. Are you hungry, sweetie pie wings? Inquired Perdita. I'm starving, said Ringlet. And Isky starving? You exaggerated. You don't know how lucky you are. Huh? Lucky? Calorie deprivation sharpens the brain, increases stamina, and makes your tail shine in the dark. It's been scientifically proven. We've been travelling for a long time with nothing to eat, said Ringlet. She opened her handbag and peered inside. I might have had a few lollies, that's all. Lollies! The plats shot up into the air like 2 rigid bits of driftwood. One of them swatted a small piddlerfish. The piddlerfish did what piddlerfish do when they are swatted. He piddled all over the plats. You exaggerated again. Your journey nothing more than a blip. I have been travelling for eons, and I never complain. Perdita fingered one of her long plats. As the crab tiptoed down its length, she wrinkled up her nose. Suddenly, she snapped up the plat with the crab attached and flung it back over her shoulder. The crab hit the wall of the cabin with a thwack and slid down under the table. Ringlet looked down at her menu and tried to focus on what she liked to order. The specials of the day: consommé fluff, foam flamboy, memory munchies. Hang on a mo, she thought. Memory munchies? That's convenient. The Kinner reappeared. Have you two decided? The words came out in a gabble. The memory mumble. One memory munchie. And you, ma'am? Nonsense! Platita boomed. She will have a bowl of cold algae. There's no need to overdo it. I want the memory munchie, she said. Because I don't. No buts, Ringlet. And as far as the past remembering, I can tell you all you need to know about that. She raised her hand and snapped her fingers. The large crab scabbled up to regain his position on Platita's shoulder. He had a crack in his shell, and he'd lost a leg. With some effort, the crab spoke. Platita, 6th of the 7 stellar mermaids, says she will have the specialty of the house, the blancmange et le blanc. The Kinner looked shocked. Surely you, that is to say, I'm afraid that needs to be pre-ordered 3 months in advance. The Kinner moved backwards. What about a jelly, identical to the one served on the Titanic? The last meal, would that... There was a yap, and Iski's head popped up from underneath the table. He saw nothing to eat, looked disappointed, and shot back down again. The last meal, said Platita thoughtfully. That phrase certainly has a pleasant ring to it. But no, I'm never one to take the easy option. The Kinner's spikes stiffened. So it's blancmange et le blanc, the castle-shaped one I had last time. Platita's voice reverberated around the restaurant, and her plait swung around the Kinner's spiky head like a giant lasso. Don't forget the garnish. Do I make myself clear? Of course, said the Kinner. What garnish did Madame? I don't care, said Platita. I just want garnish. A meal is not a meal without an expensive frippery dangling somewhere. She tapped a blue fingernail on the crab's shell, and he disappeared, returning seconds later with an exquisite tiny mirror. He climbed up onto her chin and wedged the lizard tail handle between folds of skin. Platita, 6th of the 7 stellar mermaids, studied her reflection. Even perfection needs retouching, she said. So, I need to visit the ladies' room. When I return, we'll sort you out. Platita rose and squeezed the rappel door. As she pulled a length of towel through, the large crab proclaimed in his raspy voice, Platita, 6th of the 7 stellar mermaids, is leaving momentarily to buff her epidermis. The Kinner's beady eyes turned to Ringlet. I'd love to stay and chat, she said, but Madame has not only arrived a day early, she has ordered a giant pudding that usually takes 5 shifts, 40 hours to prepare. And last time we didn't do what she wanted. We had to close for structural repairs. The Kinner grabbed a connective wave travelling through the restaurant and with a grunt of annoyance returned to the kitchen. A procession emerged from the kitchen in Clavas du Jour. 10 flounders were carrying a tray on which was balanced a gigantic wobbly castle. Everyone stared. Even the Nixies gazed in open-mouthed awe. Blemish et le bleu, 4 turrets and a drawbridge, drawled the Kinner, garnished with a single rare sea tulip from the oceans of Babylon, and stuffed with day-old flipperbys. Oh, and a bowl of cold algae. Enjoy! Platita narrowed her eyes and stared at the flipperbys. She nodded approvingly. Torn from their mother's tentacles before they saw the first tie bib. She warbled, just the way I like them. Ringlet gazed at the spectacular treat. It was blue, Aegean blue. A central pillar in the middle was surrounded by 4 towers. On the top of the central pillar was a bulbous orange flower. The turrets wobbled, and as she looked closer, she could see tiny creatures inside, their wings still fluttering. Surely she's not going to... She was. Platita extended a finger and plucked out a flipperby, popping it, waving wings and all, into her mouth. She sighed. Simply exquisite, she said, with her mouth full. Platita closed her eyes, and Ringlet felt the kinner dropping something on her lap. It was a squash cookie. The kinner's purple spikes pricked Ringlet's cheek. Stale, she whispered, but the best I could do. You'll get a memory, but it'll be an old one. And this may be romantic rubbish, but I've been told they work better in the light of a full moon. Quick, in your handbag, before I get caught. The crab teetered along an arm and faced Ringlet inquisitively. What's inside a girl's handbag is nobody else's business, she thought. She saw that the crab's missing leg had been mended with a toothpick. Platita still had her eyes shut, and with an elegant slurping, was enjoying the turret she had scooped up and shoveled into her mouth. Ringlet reached over and pulled out a flutterby. Poor little thing, she wiped its delicate wings. It would never flutter. Clogged up with sticky plumage, she pushed it outside the window onto a passing current. The flipperby stretched out its wings and darted away. So, what's in that pretty little head of yours, sweet hums? Platita's eyes were open now, and drilling into Ringlet. Bits of le bleu dripped down her chin. I thought you were going to tell me that, said Ringlet. It's a bit fuzzy, my mind, empty in fact, although every now and then a memory pops up. That's a good sign, isn't it? Platita looked disturbed. You shouldn't think too much pie, sweetie, she said, gesturing towards the bowl of algae. Now eat up. Ringlet was silent. I thought, she was trailing off, that getting my memory back would be a good thing. I do remember being told. Yes, Platita asked. You remember being told what? Come on, Ringlet. It sounds stupid. I'll be the judge of stupidity, said Platita, in a voice like candied sea syrup. And truth to tell, darlinka, a stupidity shared is a stupidity doubled, or even tripled. So be a good little krill and tell me. Well, you see, explained Ringlet, there's a voice in my head. A faint voice. She emphasized the word faint because she didn't want to be thought of as odd. Said Platita. Not a good sign, is it, dear? Hearing voices. And what does the silly little voice say? I'm the one, says Ringlet. The voice says, I'm the one. Is that so? Said Platita. It keeps saying it, like there's something like that I'm supposed to do. But I'm just... You're just what? Asked Platita. I'm just an ordinary, everyday Mergirl, said Ringlet. I wish the voice would stop. Platita reached out and grabbed the seed tulip from the top of the center turret. She produced a vial and sprinkled 3 droplets from the bottle onto the flower. A touch of my special tincture, just for you, guaranteed to joggle the memory. Ringlet stared at the sea tulip. She was hungry. She lifted it up to her mouth. Close up, it wasn't particularly attractive. Plus, she wasn't sure about whether it was good manners or not to eat the garnish. I'm full, she said. The seed tulip was beginning to wilter around the edge, and it was giving off a peculiar odour. Absolutely full, she repeated. Nonsense, Ringlet, snapped Platita. Shove that tulip in your gob now. Her voice was harsh. I'm sure it's delicious, said Ringlet in a firm voice, but I'll save it for later, if you don't mind. She didn't dare open her purse, because it had a memory munchie in it that, technically, hadn't been paid for. She didn't want to get either herself or the killer in trouble. She pretended to open it, because I'm clever and devious, if I need to be, and something here isn't right. She snapped it open and snapped it shut under the table, and then did what most of us do when faced with food we do not want to eat. She dropped it, and it drifted downwards. 14 crabs watched it fall. They had not been fed for many weeks, and they were exhausted from having to haul round the oversized tail. The bulbous seed tulip thudded onto the floor of the cave and laid there glistening. The crabs did not give a goldfish clink about whether it was or not bad manners to eat the garnish. They were famished, and it was food, freshly delivered. The oceans may have paused, but our adventure is far from over. Join Libby next Saturday at 9:30 a.m. as we continue exploring Ringlet and the Day the Ocean Stopped, by Felicity Williams, published by Ahoy, and imprint of the Cuba Press. Keep your curiosity alive and your hearts open, because the magic, mystery, and wonder of the sea are waiting for us in the next chapter on Spin Me a Tale.